Several years ago, I was on a bike ride, and I came across a tattooed moose. I got off my bike and I contemplated, do I get the duck fat fries or the duck club? Our next speaker was also on a bike ride when he came across a tattooed moose. However, he looked north and said, what can I do with these 21 parcels on 7 acres in this ramshackle neighborhood? That tract of land is what we now know is nearly 100,000 square feet of redeveloped half-mile north, home to Edmunds Oast, Butcher and Bee, and several tech companies. I chose the duck fat fries, the club, and a tallboy PBR. Stephen Zoukis, CEO of Ravencliff Company, is a true visionary. Not only was Ravencliff the driving force behind Half Mile North, but also responsible for the 130,000 square foot redevelopment of the Pacific Box and Crate. As a previous partner in Jamestown Properties, he's made a large imprint on high-end New York real estate. His purchases include the General Motors building, One Times Square, the 8th Avenue building that houses Google's New York operation, and the Chelsea Market. Stephen graduated from UVA School of Engineering and Columbia University Law School. Having spent most of his professional career in Atlanta and New York City, Stephen now lives full-time on Sullivan's Island. He's donated over $1 million of his own money to local charities here in the Low Country, and his leadership advice is, try your best to leave things a little better than you found them. Stephen, why Charleston?
Thank you. Good question, why Charleston? And on a personal level, I was lucky enough to have a brother-in-law who was a submarine officer and had a house on Isle of Palms, going back to 1970. So my wife and I had a very long connection with Charleston that was, a mile wide and an inch deep. But when the time came to choose between developing residential in the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn in 2006 or coming down here, we came down here. And happily, it was a good move. It was actually driven by a wobble in the the residential market in New York. And it came down to a question of where to go to not make money for a few years, which I succeeded in grandly, and came out of that dive at the Tattooed Moose and thought, well, somebody's got to make some money here. It may as well be me. So why that? And I'm going to digress and not talk about these projects because you don't need to hear more about them. I'm going to talk a little bit about the way I look at Charleston, and this is just matters of opinion. Feel free to disagree with them. But in the course of my time at Jamestown, we went from $20 million of Walmarts in small town southern cities to $8 billion worth of big city real estate. And a lot of it was invested in neighborhoods that people would smack their heads and go, what the hell are you guys thinking about? Well, some of those projects we made over $1 billion of profit selling. And you don't have to go to Harvard B School to figure out that's a good thing. Even lawyers can figure that out. Anyway, so I'm going to give you a few opinions and then sort of translate them to Charleston. And you heard some of this from these other folks. One, the biggest problem in the world is how you hire the smart people you need to run your company. Number two, well-managed big cities have an immense advantage over small towns. Okay, not a plus for Charleston. Over the years, I've thought that America has several things that we're really good at it: finance, media, tech, and as I put it, blowing things up. And if you find a city that's got at least two of those things, and it's a big one, you'll do very well. If it's a smaller one, it probably needs a little bit of each. Anyway, so these are theories I kind of developed over the years buying things at Jamestown. And in 2003, we were branching out and going away from core funds that owned the buildings that Jeff talked about to opportunity funds. And I was trying to convince my German partners that we needed to do this, and they said, well, we need you to show me a city. Pick any city in the country and show me. And I picked Charleston. And I did it because it seemed like it had a number of things going for it back in 2003. And I can remember the pitch. It was multiple legs, which is to say a port, struggling at the time, which it's recovered from, although it's kind of fallen behind some of its competition and is still catching up. The military, influx of generally well-to-do retirees, a bit of technology. At the time, Blackbaud was about 400 employees. Benefit Focus was about 200, but you had the Spay Wars people, so there was something going on already. Good prospects for hiring certain kinds of smart people, interestingly, and no institutional money in its right mind would come here. I was wrong on that. There may be a day of reckoning on that, because one of the problems in my opinion, that's going on here is there's too much money piling in to a small market to absorb, and you have a very distorted market. And when the time comes to get out, not everybody's going to get out. So we'll see how that turns out. So over the last 12 years, counted that wrong, 15 years, things have continued to go well. And some things that we had no idea about, or at least I didn't, came to pass. The port did better, the population continued to grow, great expanse of the tech sector, what I call the manufacturing trifecta. I mean, getting Boeing, getting Volvo, and getting Mercedes is unbelievable. I mean, think back to 1992 when BMW announced in the upstate. That was 1,800 workers, and it totally transformed the upstate. I mean, at that time, we owned 10% of the distribution facilities in Greenville, Spartanburg, and that was one building. I mean, it was pretty amazing change. So this is something that's not likely to be repeated. I mean, this manufacturing boom is extraordinary, and so all to the good. So, so what's going on now? I mean, we talked about, you know, the charge was to talk about opportunities and challenges. One of the things to think about is what's this place going to look like in 10 years? And I'm not sure people have kind of internalized what it means to have so many people so far away from the peninsula. I mean, not only is this going to be a sort of a change of mentality of the peninsula is no longer so important to me, it's a long way to where these people are going to be moving. And sure enough, we really do need to have mass transit. I have up till now not been a big believer, but I really think that every problem that Charleston's got is better solved if you've got a decent transit system. So one of the things that's got to happen is we've got to make a commitment to that, or else it's just going to be a different place. You can't really solve your affordable housing problem by building affordable housing on unaffordable land. And we clearly have unaffordable land in and around the peninsula. You got to be able to move people from affordable land and affordable housing to the jobs that are going to go somewhere. Now, having watched Atlanta grow, it seems to me remarkably and eerily similar. You could move those jobs up the peninsula, as Atlanta could have moved them up to Midtown. But Atlanta blew the chance, and the jobs jumped out to the perimeter and then out to Alpharetta and beyond, and then came back. So what MAC is doing now is something that could have been done in 1980, but it wasn't. It had all the same kind of advantages that the Upper Peninsula's got, but the city overlooked incentivizing growth in that area, and it got away. And it came back, but only after decades of being spread out and enhancing this sprawl problem. The ability to connect jobs to people with affordable housing is incredibly important. I mean, I think that after, you know, as part of what you do to attract smart people is smart people look at what it costs to live. It's the biggest expenditure that they make. And it happened just quite remarkably. There was a great thing came across my email this morning from Axios, which is headlined, "What Really Happened? HQ2 finalists," the Amazon finalists, "from the heartland never had a chance. The higher productivity arising from the dense concentration of very high-skilled programming talent in San Francisco, New York, and D.C. cannot be matched by smaller markets, such as Columbus." There's an article about Columbus, Ohio. "They have to be attractive on other margins and a much lower cost of living with a good set of urban amenities is how they must do it." This is it in a nutshell. You got to have inexpensive housing, and you have to have an urban setting that either some people can live in or other people can visit and work in. Just to give you a clue of how Charleston stacks up on that, cost of housing, if you rate average in the US at 100, Charleston's 164. Now there are places that are really off the charts, like San Francisco, which is 712, but Columbus is 76. Chattanooga is 75. New Orleans is 100. So there's some competition there, and we need to kind of figure out where in the solar system we want to be. You know, the New Yorks and the San Franciscos are in one place in the orbit, and the Atlantas and the Dallases are another one, with Charlotte kind of in there someplace. We're in a different spot, but we got to figure out a way to make this really be an attractive city if we want to have a real economy, which I define as a place your kids can grow up and have a job and not have to start in New York or Atlanta and Charlotte, okay? Or we can be a tourist trap. And if you don't do anything, that's what we're going to be. And, you know, in the deathless words of Andres Duany when he came here to critique the BAR, relax, it's okay either way. But we got to stop and make a choice. And in order to drive towards a real economy, there's some things we have to do, like the rapid transit. No matter what we do, we got to fix flooding. Those are the two things I'm watching to see what Charleston wants to become, is to, you know, how we address those kind of problems. I think that as time goes on, clearly office use, I mean, my bet is in 10 years there's no office use south of the Crosstown except for government agencies. Pretty bold. But this is like Lower Manhattan in 1980. You know, the number of times people say something to me like, if I have to turn, you know, when I have to come in from Mount Pleasant, get off the bridge and go left, I want to slit my wrists. Honestly, it's not that bad, but if people hate it that much, sooner or later a moment will come when somebody moves north of the Crosstown and everybody else decides it's okay. That's exactly what happened in Atlanta. What finally turned Midtown was a big law firm announced it was going to Midtown. And you could watch, I mean, it was 5 years before there was only one big law firm in downtown Atlanta. This is in a city that 15 years earlier I had come to, and people had said, these law firms and accounting firms won't go to Peachtree Center because it's 5 blocks north of 5 Points. And they did. They all moved out once it became safe. Charleston's a little different because there's not 200,000 square foot law firms, but it's going to happen. The moment will come when somebody is going to come north of the Crosstown, and it's over for downtown at that point. I'm being a little extreme here, but just to get your attention. Shopping has obviously changed dramatically. I mean, I used to pitch Charleston as a great alternative to New York because it was so wonderful. You remember the stage where we went through? We still had lots of local shops on King Street and the palm trees in the middle of the street. I mean, it was wonderful. It's now just, you know, basically, you know, you can find them anywhere, chain stores and stuff for kids at College of Charleston. Not a great moment for retail in general, but, you know, it's going to move someplace. Something's going to happen there. But that's going to be another leg that's going to disappear. And I think growth will actually pick up almost no matter what we do, because I think once you get to a certain size, like around 1 million, then it gets faster because you become a bigger city. You begin to get bigger things. The things I point to are things like, well, what happens if your kid's got special needs? How many school choices do you have? You know, what about educational, or what about medical issues? You know, people make these decisions and they opt for bigger cities because of that, and they do it because they know their job's not going to last for a lifetime. They know they need another job, and in a smaller city, there's a better chance you got to move to another city. So once you get that bigger thing going on, it goes faster. So I think, you know, it's a critical thing to figure out what place we want to be. And I think choice is something that's kind of underrated. You can make decisions that matter for even things like cities. The one I use locally is short-term rentals on Sullivan's Island. You know, big change for Sullivan's as a result of that. big changes last a long time. In New York City, in 1848, they passed a law that said no steam engines below 42nd Street. That's why Manhattan looks the way it does. So these political questions and zoning questions that we have are all important, but need to be approached like there are real consequences from this stuff. And this is a city that's still small enough that if the people in this room get involved and get focused and can force kind of one agenda on the community, and I don't mean force it down their throats, but force people to make a decision. Do you want to be a tourist trap? Do you want to be a real city? How do we go about that? We have an opportunity to do something great. It's going to be good no matter what, but we can make a choice about what we want to come out the other end of this thing. And that's what I've got to say. As I said, all my opinions, take them or leave them.